Here at Miami Community News. I am Andy Korge. And you know what? If you have ever bought a book in Miami-Dade County, you probably know this guy to my right, Mitchell Kaplan of Books and Books. We're going to talk to, as our special guest today, Mitchell Kaplan, who, is had a bookstore, has been known for that. But we're going to talk to him about something a little different because he has moved into the world of motion pictures and TV entertainment. And some of the stuff he is doing, Mitchell, really, really exciting. So we're going to talk to Mitchell about that. Myself and my able-bodied co-host here to my left, Mr. Josh Leibman, Commissioner, City of South Miami, is joining me. Guys, thanks for joining me. I'm going to do a little news before we get into the interview.
Absolutely.
And real quickly, here we go. CDC warns that the new highly contagious COVID variant discovered in the UK may become the dominant version by March, as the coronavirus death toll surpasses 400,000 in the United States. The FBI is investigating whether the woman who stole the laptop from Speaker Nancy Pelosi's office during the riot 2 weeks ago in our nation's capital tried to sell it to the Russian government. Now, that's a real patriot if I've ever seen one right there, folks. And in the wake of tomorrow's presidential inauguration, seating President-elect Joe Biden, Donald Trump is doing what he does best: nothing. Word is that Trump will not be at the White House to greet the Bidens, a ceremonial gesture that has occurred for centuries in our nation capital on Inauguration Day. And finally, in preparation for tomorrow's inauguration, the FBI is warning that extremists are discussing posing as National Guards. The country is on high alert as these far-right extremists attempt to disrupt the Biden inauguration tomorrow. So that's the top stories in the news. Mitchell Kaplan, thank you for joining Josh and I today here at Miami Community News.
It's absolutely my pleasure, and particularly in this maelstrom of a time, to be able to take a break and talk about something else is a good thing. And I want to thank you for all the incredible work you do. I mean, you're bringing us all closer together as a community in the middle of this pandemic. So
well, it's nice. And listen, it's nice. I'm not going to start, making everybody's head bigger here today, but it's really impressive what you've been doing. And I really started to edify myself about it a little bit in the last few days in preparation of you coming here. But now your venture into films and television is really impressive. And I just want to throw out the first question. We all know about Books and Books. So I really, with all due respect, am not so interested in talking about Books and Books today. But I really am. I'm a film buff. I've always been one. And I really, in light of what's happened the last year with the pandemic and the sort of the whole film industry has changed, I'm curious how that's going to move into the future. But let's start with just how you got into, film producing. How did that happen?
Well, that's a thank you for that, Andy. I mean, I've been a bookseller for over 40 years now.
Yeah.
But I grew up loving film. I mean, I grew up in Miami, and like a lot of us, Nat Chediak was a bit of a mentor. I used to go to his, the cinema tech that he had. And I even joke with him that when I was in high school, Nat was a senior at UM, and I used to go to watch his films that he was putting on at UM. So my whole life, I've always loved film. And I think I always had a dream that I would kind of merge the two at some point.
Okay.
And when you look particularly at how many films are made from books, if you scratch beneath the surface, you'll be shocked at how many books are actually the original intellectual property for a lot of different films. And so I used to play the game as a bookseller. This would make a great film. I get to see books so early, often in manuscript, before they're even published. So there was a book that came along, and I thought to this was about 10 years ago, 11 years ago, and I said, God, it was handed to me by an editor in New York, and it was by an unknown author. And she said, how are we going to make this a bestseller? And I said, well, it's clearly going to be a bestseller. but I want to make it into a movie. It had that broad out of Africa sweep. And it had the kind of Merchant Ivory filmmaking that I sort of always loved. But I didn't know what the hell I was doing, right? So I read the book, and fortunately, I have a sister, a beloved sister, who's just a couple years younger than me, Marcy, who, if she's in Miami, you should have on one day, because she can tell you all you want to know about television. She was an actress here in Miami, and then went to New York, became a TV development person, and she ran a number of TV studios. For instance, she ran a studio that produced, and it was really her doing, the great show with Lily Tomlin and Jane Fonda. That was Marcy's show.
Wow.
Before that, she worked with Fox TV and did Simpsons, Malcolm in the Middle, so Marcy really knew her way around television.
Wow.
But if you remember, 10 years ago, TV and film were very distinct.
Very.
There wasn't, we didn't have this pandemic, and there wasn't a coming together.
And a lot of actors that did film didn't really want to go.
They didn't want to do television. So I called up Marcy and I said, Marcy, I've got this book. I love it. I think it'll make a great film. And she said, all right, let me show it to my good friend, a woman named Paula Mazur, who had done films, had produced. She started in the old days with like Spalding Gray and the Vagina Monologues, but then she went on and did films with. She did a number of other films, and so Marcy turned it over to her best friend, and her best friend loved the book. So I flew out to LA and I met her, and then we met the author and we optioned the book. What you do is you option it. We had an 18-month option, and after about 6 months, Paula called me and said, Mitch, you have to come out to LA, and we're taking a meeting at Fox 2000. So I went to the Fox lot and met with the head of Fox 2000. Oh
my God, you're taking a meeting.
I mean, it was really great. But I'm like, I'm older, so for me, it wasn't like, for me, it was a little different. So I was a bookseller, that sort of thing. So I go and I'm sitting in the room with Paula and this woman, Elizabeth, and myself. And Paula turns to Elizabeth and says, should we tell him? And I said, what? And they basically agreed to do the film right in the room from the pitch.
Moly, are you
and the book is called The Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society. But to show you what I've learned about Hollywood is that was about 10 years before the film got made.
Wow.
So what happened was, as there fits and starts, and like Moneyball, right? The great movie Moneyball took 12 years to get made. Things begin, then they fall apart. Our very first iteration of this film, we had Kevin Branagh directing, and we had, what's her name, in Titanic? The actress in Titanic. Kate Winslet was starring.
Yes.
And then that fell apart. But it ended up with Lily James starring, and we moved to Studio Canal out of England. Mm-hmm. And it came out, and it's still one of Netflix's biggest, most highly rented romances that you can imagine. Takes place during and after World War II, when the Isle of Guernsey was the only island to be occupied by the Nazis. And this small group of people were able to keep their sanity by forming a book group. So what perfect film for me to make, right?
Was it frustrating? I mean, 10 years, you kind of weren't a movie guy. So was it like, well, what's going on here?
No, well, Paul and I, what happened is over those 10 years, we made another movie first based on a book called The Man Who Invented Christmas, which was written by a local, Les Standiford, who writes for, he's the director of creative writing at FIU, and did a nonfiction book about Charles Dickens and the writing of A Christmas Carol. So we had independently produced that while we were waiting for Guernsey to get off the ground. And this company called Bleecker Street put in a lot of money, and we had Christopher Plummer starring in it.
Wow.
We had Jonathan Pryce, Dan Stevens.
Wow.
We filmed it in Dublin. So that was happening. So what you find is when you're producing and you have a production company, you're working on many different projects at the same time. and some move forward, some go into the back. But I really believe that we take on projects that we're passionate about, so we just don't let them go.
Right.
We just are passionate about them, and we keep going until we get them made. And now with the pandemic, things have really shifted into television to a large extent. A lot of feature directors, well-known feature directors, are moving into the TV sphere, and some good television is coming from it. I mean, there was that really great The Queen's Gambit, if you saw it,
I hear that's
which
fantastic.
was fantastic. And I was telling you earlier, I've been watching old television like Oz and the Fargo series, which was great.
Right.
And it's a way of, it's like TV when I was a kid and when you were a kid. I get together with my wife, we watch a television program because there's really not much else to do.
And the beauty of TV today is that you can watch it whenever you want.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really the beauty of it. Back when we were kids, you had to sit there and wait for that Thursday night at 8 p.m. And it was here and it was gone, But your latest project, I haven't seen it yet. Let Him Go, starring Kevin Costner, Diane Lane. I mean,
and Leslie Manville.
And Leslie, who apparently from the trailer that I watched, she looks menacing.
She is.
What a villain she must be.
She really is.
In that movie.
And then we have Jeffrey Donovan, who was here for a long time.
Yes.
And he's very villainous. What the story is basically is everything we do, the Mitchell Kaplan company, we formed a company, small. It's me and Paula and this wonderful woman named Kimmy Armstrong and Camisia. So there are 4 of us. And we do everything from books to screen. Everything starts with a book for us.
Okay.
So we took this book called Let Him Go. That was a marvelous book written by Larry Watson. And he writes about the West. That's what he writes about. And so this amazing director and guy who does the adaptations, a writer named Tom Bazooka, who did Family Stone, he worked with us on Guernsey. And so we worked with him on Let Him Go, and he did the adaptation. And immediately Focus Features took it, and Focus Features funded it. And Paula, who's I still have a bookshop that I'm running, but so Paula's doing this full time. Paula basically moved to Canada where we filmed it, about 2 years ago, and spent 6 to 8 months there really doing all the work that needed to be done. And the film has come out beautifully. The reviews have been great.
Apparently, I'm going to read Variety called it, and this is a quote, "They turned the movie into an unlikely thing, a touchingly bone-weary romance steeped in vengeance."
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So, I mean, I'm dying to see it.
The setup of the story is that Diane Lane and Kevin Costner are a kind of retired couple. And it takes place in the 60s, in the early 60s.
Yes.
He was a sheriff. She was his wife. And she broke horses. That's what she did.
So she's a tough gal.
She's a tough gal. And her son got married to this woman, but her son then dies. It's not a spoiler alert. It happens pretty early.
Right.
So it's not a spoiler. I mean, it happens early. So the son dies, but they had a grandchild. And the grandchild and the daughter was living with them after the son dies for about 3 or 4 years. She then falls in love with a guy from the Wee Boy clan.
Wee Boy clan, yes.
Which is a little bit like it's a road movie that becomes Deliverance by the end. Gotcha. The Wee Boy clan is just this matriarch, Leslie Manville. So it becomes a film about these 2 matriarchs. She then decides to go get her grandson back because she doesn't feel like he's safe.
Right.
So she goes to get him back, and then the fireworks begin to happen from that. And Kevin Costner, plays like a Kevin Costner you've never seen. He's kind of dialed back a little bit, a little moody, a little bit quiet. He's really excellent in this.
Right. The Wee Boy thing sort of, when I saw, again, just seeing the trailer, it reminded me a little bit of the Ozark sort of backstory of Ozark.
Little bit.
Right?
Little bit. Yeah.
So it looked incredibly interesting. And you mentioned Leslie Manville.
Yeah, I
So
love her.
how involved were you as producers? Tell us what a producer
I'll tell you what
does.
a producer does. There's a lot of different things a producer can do. When you look at credits and you look at like executive producer, many of them might be people tangentially related to the film, or they're the financial backers of the film in that sense, or they did some of that. And then there are producers like us. We call ourselves creative producers. So we're there right from the beginning. We choose the book. We find the person to do the adaptation. We work on finding the directors, the actors. We're all there. I'm a novice, and I know what I know, and I know what I don't know. So I don't try to push myself on this, but I have been learning an amazing amount. But what I do know is I know what I like and what I don't like. I can't always tell you how to make the sausage,
right?
But I know if it's a good sausage
or not,
good. That sort of thing. But Paula has taught me an amazing amount watching her at work. And it's the most collaborative thing that you could possibly ever imagine. It's a collaborative art form. So what will happen is, we'll work with a casting agency. Paula and the director will go through all of these different things. We will watch tapes of people. We'll do auditions when we could have live. We'll do all of those things and then decide. And then if we're working with a studio like Focus, we work with them as well. One of our films called All the Bright Places, which was funded by Netflix, we had a number of producers on that. And so that was very interesting because we would all have to come to agreement on things, which was kind of interesting as well.
Right.
So it's actually very hands-on. A lot of people say, "Oh, you just find the money." We have nothing to do with finding the money. We find a way to get it made, which is typically by trying to find a production company. And now with our TV work, we have what's called a first look deal with a company called SK Global. They did Crazy Rich Asians in the theaters,
right?
And they didn't have a TV division. So the very cool thing now is we're able to work with my sister Marcy, because she's overseeing TV for SK Global. She's their TV person.
And she obviously knows the business.
Oh, yeah. And so I'm getting to work with my sister.
Oh, that's so nice.
A delightful thing.
It's a family affair with
and Paula and Marcy are best friends. So it's a real, and the two guys who run SK Global, a guy named Charlie and John, are two great filmmakers and TV guys.
Well,
so it's kind of a cool thing.
I got to just say, good for you. What a great thing to be involved in later in your career, right? I mean, your life, now all of a sudden, you're at this point in your life and you got this whole new career. That's really
I've always in my life, starting with, because I had to, starting a bookshop is not something that your parents map out for you when you go to college and you're doing anything. So I realized in retrospect, a lot of my life has always been, why not? When presented with an opportunity, I've gone, why not? Why not try it? And being able to try the film stuff, which I love at this level, not having to start out in the mailroom and all of that sort of stuff has been really, really wonderful to see.
I bet.
So,
go ahead.
Sorry. So, Mitch, you mentioned that you have nothing to do with the financial component of producing a movie.
We have something to do with it, but we don't have the money to sort of fund it, is what I'm saying.
Certainly.
We have to find the funding.
What I wanted to ask you is if you would elaborate on that. There's, to the common viewer, we explained that the financial model of movies and how COVID has changed that with movies instead of going directly to the theater, and how that model may change going forward as well.
I shouldn't say that we have anything to do with
the
financial end. We have to know about that. But there are different ways of approaching it. Some ways are funding it yourself by finding investors. That's the indie way of doing it. We have found the straightest line is to get a production company or a studio excited about what we're doing.
Like Focus.
We've worked with Netflix. We've worked with Studio Canal, which is out of England, and France. So finding a larger company that does have access to capital who will fund what we do. That's kind of what we're looking for. And the way it works is, so what happens is when we're in that model, we are higher, even though we are the rights holders of the books and all of that, we then turn that over to the studio and we become part of the budget, basically, like the director would be part of. So the producers are part of the budget in that sense. And we might be able to share on some of the back end, or share if it reaches certain box office bumps and all of that. Now, what's been happening is, because of the pandemic, there's a glut that's beginning to happen because people can't shoot. So there are a lot of, and the studios are trying to, all of a sudden the spigots are going dry because, theaters are closing down and that sort of thing. And for instance, our movie Let 'Em Go was supposed to open in England right when Boris Johnson had the lockdown, the very same day. So the foreign box office is non-existent. So I can't tell you where it's going to be, but it's in a bit of a difficult place right now. But the good news is that a lot of people are out there doing development. So there's a lot of good stuff that's just waiting to come out. You saw what happened with, was it Universal with HBO Max, where they brought out Wonder Woman, and they just put it on HBO Max, which caused a bit of an upheaval for, people who were working under a contract based on the fact that would have been $1 billion movie at the box office. And then it goes online, and what's the financial ramification of all of that?
Well, I assume that the movie companies like Focus and all of them have really had to figure this out quickly, right?
Well, what they seem to be doing, and I'm not an expert on this, but they seem to be moving toward this. They want to become streamers. They all are beginning, as you know. Disney took back its own movies for Disney. Universal is taking its stuff back. They're all competing with Netflix, with Prime. They want to basically ultimately become streamers so that you are paying a subscription to be able to get this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's all well and good. But to me, there's something about going to the movie theater, having the big screen that, great smell of popcorn in your lap.
Yeah, I'm with you.
But what I'm curious about something. Let 'Em Go did great in the theaters, all things considered, because it came out in November in the U.S.
Right.
The first weekend, as you told us,
it was a number one box office.
Number one at the box office. Probably would have done 8 or 10 or 12 times what it did that first weekend, right? What I wonder about, because I watch these shows with actors and, I got the script and I looked at the script. Is that, because you're talking about 2 Academy Award winning or nominated actors in Diane
That's
Lane
how it works.
and Costner. Is that how it works?
They each read the script. Tom wrote an amazing script. I think he should be up there for awards for adaptation. If you read the novel, read his script, he's done an amazing job.
Tom Bazooka, yeah.
Bazooka, and he did Family Stone,
right.
And he's done a bunch of other stuff. But Tom basically wrote the script. We gave it to Focus like that. They loved it. And so right when we knew we had Focus, we then started sending it out to people we thought who could play the leads. And both Kevin Costner and Diane Lane loved it. And then they loved the idea of working together, which I didn't quite realize. They were together in the Superman movies. They played husband and wife in the Superman movies.
Didn't know that.
In a couple of them.
Right.
And they hadn't worked together since then. But the on-screen chemistry was really terrific.
They did in the Superman movies.
They were the mother and father.
Yes. When he comes down from out of the right, and they're the way, right.
Right. So so there is a subset of people watching this,
right,
who are like, comic book nerds who are watching this because of that.
Wow.
But the on-screen stuff was, I was on set. Paula was there for the whole time. I was on set for a total of about 3 or 4 weeks. But watching that dynamic was really, really cool.
So, Mitch, what you're saying is that if they were Superman's parents and then let him go, they had a daughter and the daughter died, is that Superman did have a sister, but we'll never have a chance to see that Superman's sister.
Right.
No, I think I mean it just seems like I'm really anxious to see the movie. Yeah. Let's talk about some of the projects that you have coming up. So I mentioned to you before we went on here that Nick Griffin was on my radio show, and we were talking about his book, the
Year of Dangerous
Days, right?
Miami in 1980.
Right. And it really resonated with me because it was the year that involved the McDuffie riots. It involved the Cocaine Cowboys and all the.
Well, they were just starting
up right that year, and all those things.
And Marielle.
And it really resonated with me because my second job in radio was with Paxson Broadcasting, and our receptionist at our radio station was Arthur McDuffie's wife.
Oh, you're kidding?
No.
His ex-wife?
His ex-wife, right, or his widowed wife.
She was a receptionist at Paxson.
After this is in 1992. Wow. And so it really resonated with me. But when Nicholas came in to do the radio show with me, I had just gotten the book, and I've just started to read it now. I've gotten around to reading it, and the forward in and of itself, when I read it, the first thing I said to him when he walked in the studio, I'll never forget, is this thing should be a movie or something. I mean, just by reading the forward, a movie or a series. What's on the horizon for that?
I'm an older guy, so I remember that year like it was yesterday. I was actually teaching high school at the time.
Really?
Before I had the bookshop. So I was just so attuned to what was happening in Miami. I just moved back from being away from Miami. And I remember the year like it was yesterday. And it was a year of such incredible upheaval in this city. But if you look now with the 50 years behind us, or 40 years behind us, you're seeing that was the pivotal year in the development of Miami. You know, Miami sort of turned away from that, and Maurice Ferré had a lot to do with it.
Yes,
and his notion of turning toward Latin America as Miami becoming a business and banking center.
Yes,
and all of that. But you see the beginnings of it there. So a city that was in crisis remade itself, and that to me is really exciting. And we have an amazing guy who is going to be in charge of the show, a guy named Tom Fontana. Tom is best known for doing Homicide and Oz and a bunch of stuff. And what I love about Oz is the story of a prison. And you see the story of the prison told through the eyes of these individuals. And the Year of Dangerous Days is the story of Miami told through the eyes of all these different people who are going through it.
And now that's going to be a TV series.
We hope it's a series that'll have more than 1 year. That'll go on.
And that would be with a streaming service, perhaps like a Netflix.
Well, we haven't gone out to sell it yet.
Okay,
we're right now in the development phase.
Gotcha.
So we're doing the writing and putting the Bible together and all of that. And what's really cool is we have an amazing team together, and Nick is involved, and it's just great. Tom is right now. There's a TV show he has on now called King of the City, I think it is, and he's actually shooting during COVID in New York City, almost like the NBA under a bubble. We just talked, and they haven't had to shut down at all in 10 weeks, so that's been kind of good. So there is some shooting going on now.
Wow, and a couple other future projects. Reading online about it, you have Nicole Kidman on board for The Silent Wife.
Yeah, it's a book.
Tell us about that.
All right, The Silent Wife is an amazingly great kind of revenge story of a woman who's in love with her husband, but her husband kind of has an affair with his best friend's daughter, and they don't have any kids. She finds out about it, and then it goes from there. And then the best friend finds out about it too. So you've got these competing people trying to go after the husband. And the question is, who who gets him? And if you want to get him, and he's gotten, but maybe you're not sure you're the one who got him. Are you really culpable? In that sense. And so what happened was, that's a story in which, and we've had that book for a number of years now, where both a lot of actors now have their own production companies. And so Nicole has one called Blossom Films.
Yes.
So when we were going after that book, Blossom Films was going after it, and so were we. So we decided to partner. And they're an amazing group. Nicole Kidman would star in it. And we have an amazing script written by Billy Ray, who did Captain Phillips.
Wow.
Remember that?
Yes.
And he's really, really good. So he wrote the screenplay, and we're now casting about for a director and all that. And we already have Amazon willing to do it. So it would be streamed on Amazon once it was done.
What is, if I could real quick, and I want you to jump in whenever you want, Josh, chicken and egg, okay? What comes first? You get Nicole Kidman on board. Do like the movie studios and the streaming, do they like flock now to you?
Well, it's interesting because each film, each project has its own path, so to speak. Sometimes it's the material. Like if it was a hugely bestseller book, that we went, believe it or not, I mean, it's crazy to think about it, but my kids were reading this book that they were all loving, back 10 years, 12 years ago. And I remember going to Paula, we have to go after this book. And so I started going after it. And they knew what they had, the author did. And they were waiting for it to get published. And it was the Hunger Games, right? So I was going after the Hunger Games, but we lost out to like a $15 million studio purchase, basically. So it really all depends. What happened with this, and the reason why we're doing it with Amazon, and I always hate to use that word, but the film thing is fine. As a bookseller, it's anathema. But the film studio is different. They have different people involved. But Nicole has a deal with Amazon, actually.
I see.
If you notice, she did Big Little Lies.
Yes.
Which I don't know if it was Amazon or not, but she's doing she's incredibly busy, and she's really working. She's one of the great female, one of the actresses who's able to get work at the age that she is.
She's a legend.
Great. Yeah,
really,
like Meryl Streep.
Yeah. Yes. The other project, which I'm sort of a history buff, so when I was reading about it online, it really, really interests me, and that is the Lincoln Conspiracy. Right. Brad Meltzer,
the great Brad
and
Meltzer.
Josh Mensch.
Yeah.
Wrote it, correct?
Yeah.
And you've got on board Nia DaCosta, who's kind of an interesting story.
She is.
Nia DaCosta is the first Black woman and youngest person to direct the upcoming Marvel film.
Right.
Correct? And so and she did Little Woods, which was a critically acclaimed movie
with Lily James, who was in our Guernsey film.
Okay.
Enough.
Oh, interesting. So tell us a little bit about the Lincoln Conspiracy, what that's about, etc.
So it's by a friend, Brad Meltzer, who lives in South Florida, who's one of the great, not only is he a writer, people don't realize, but he's as famous in the comic book world. Brad is written for comic books.
Really?
Oh yeah. Brad is one of the most, and he has got a kids book series called the I Am series. Brad is really one of the most generous, great guys, but he's a history buff. So he started this thing called the Presidential Conspiracies. The very first one was about George Washington and about kind of a CIA-like group with George Washington. And so he wrote the Lincoln Conspiracy about the fact, and it's so chilling right now, on his way to the first inauguration, there was a conspiracy by white supremacists to kill him.
Right.
And Brad, that becomes the ticking clock on this series. And it turns out we got the rights to it. We worked with Brad, and we've been working with Brad. And it turns out that Nia and her work partner Gabrielle are Lincoln nuts too.
Really.
And the idea of being able to show this through a Black perspective is so A, unique, and B, so appropriate, because it would be really interesting to see how this, because Frederick Douglass was involved. You had that incredible, horrible situation, with Sumter, who almost gets killed in Congress.
Yes.
So you had a time of great upheaval, all dealing with abolition and slavery. And to see this through the prism of a Black writer and director is, to me, really, really exciting.
When should we expect that?
It's
still in development.
It's all in development. So as I said, there's a glut right now with, so we're, I don't know that we're in a rush, because I think a lot of streamers, a lot of studios, nobody really knows what the future is going to be, right now.
Right.
And they've held back. Nia has another film coming out, a very famous film, which is a horror film with Jordan Peele.
Candyman. Yeah.
And that film was held back until 2021. And I don't know how far, they want it to be in theaters, a lot of people.
Yeah, she's got to be. I mean, doing a movie like Candyman, I think it was 92, 3 when that came out.
Oh no, a different Candyman.
Yeah, no, yeah, but
this is the remake.
This is the remake of it, right. but it originally came out in the early 90s. Yeah. With Jordan Peele, he's a hot commodity.
Yeah, and she's brilliant. This Nia DeCastro is just brilliant and has her own special way of looking at things. The thing that's exciting to me, if we can broaden it a little bit, both in the film work and also in the book side of it, is young voices are shooting to the surface. And for the very first time, publishing has been a very white kind of a place.
Right.
So we're beginning really to see multicultural voices. The amount of voices coming out of South Florida is amazing. A woman named Patricia Engel has a book coming out in March. She's from Latin America. Tanana Reeve Dew, who grew up here, has a book coming out. It's just so wonderful to see it expanding, and we're being able to see our world through so many different perspectives.
Yeah, listen, we've had successes down here, Academy Award winning directors. From our very own Overtown community.
I should ask you a question, and I'm really curious about it, both of you.
Yes.
As a politician, as a
schlepper,
as a thinker, one of the things that's held us back, which held most film people back and TV people back from actually working in South Florida, is that there is no tax credit here, and there used to be, and I don't understand why
either.
We do not try to reinstitute the tax credit. When we shot in Canada for Let Him Go, which took place in the Dakotas and Montana, we got a 30% tax credit.
Yeah, and there's some states like Louisiana and South Carolina and Georgia that have immense tax credits. Ours we've had it here. It's never been like other states as well, even when we had it. And it's curious to me because it seems like an industry that would just explode in Florida. Right?
Completely. The weather, the various scenery that you could have. And what it does is it creates, you hear about all of this, we're going to become a tech city. Well, we could easily become a film and
no
TV
question
city in a very short time.
The weather, the different scenery we have
Not
here.
to mention homegrown talent.
Yes.
When we shot in Dublin, for instance, where we did Man Who Invented Christmas, everything from makeup to location scouts to drivers, the amount of work that it brought people was astonishing. And you have to spend, to get that tax credit, you literally have to spend money here in order to get the tax
and it's
credit.
like using Let Him Go as an example. You guys went up to Canada because from a financial standpoint, it made sense to do it there, right? I mean, if the opportunity, not to say that movie in particular, because it wasn't set really for Florida, but if those dynamics occurred or existed in the state of Florida, the feeling is for you, like me, we're going to get a lot of production.
Well, we all know that Dexter, for instance, which was based in South Florida, after a season or two moved.
Yes.
Because it wasn't. And it would be horrible. I want to do Year of Dangerous Days so that we could do it in Miami.
Of course.
That's where it needs to be done.
Yeah.
So we need to talk that up somehow a little bit, I think.
I've known you for some time. And one thing, and as I'm talking to you here, it just resonates with me. You have such a calming sort of way about you. No, you really do. And does that kind of lend itself for being as a producer? Because my God, I would go berserk for 10 years waiting for something to get done.
Well, you know what it is. It's like the old Woody Allen joke, like, I don't get upset. I just grow tumors. God forbid. I internalize a lot of it. It's not to say that
must be your guy's Jewish background there, huh?
That's exactly right. Well, actually, it could be, but there is there is a Jewish sensibility that's a little bit out there.
Yeah.
But but it's my way of being. Working in chaos is hard for me, and there's nothing like this last year not to feel like, I mean, Jesus, look what we've all just been through.
Right.
I mean, this is, talk about U.S. history. When it's written, this is one of the most substantial, this is like war.
I refer to COVID as the great disruptor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's disrupted everything.
I mean, look, I couldn't spell Zoom before this. I never did online stuff.
Well, the other thing why I say that about you is the other part of it is you produce a movie, Let Him Go. It comes into the theaters in November in the height of the pandemic, or as we're seeing the resurge of the pandemic. Everyone's talking about a presidential election at that point in time. It's number one in the theaters. It could have probably done 10 or 12 or 15 times that amount of money the first weekend, and you're just so calm about it.
Well, what can I do about it? Right.
I guess.
What can I do about it? I mean, but the good news is one step leads to another step. We have great relationships with Focus. We're looking at other projects. The one thing, I almost feel a little bit like Lucille Ball in The Chocolate Factory because I see thousands of books come through and I'm seeing them on a daily basis. And just about 1 out of 5 could be a great movie.
Right.
So I always know that there is another thing right around the corner as well.
But you're the guy. So in the dynamics of your partnership here in the production of film, movies, TV, you're sort of the guy that identifies that book and says, let's go out and get it.
We have a team that does it, but I give it some real world stuff because like anything else, there's a lot of hype that the people who are agenting books into film try to build up, but I'm on the ground, so I know what people are buying.
Right. Right.
I mean, I remember years ago before I was doing this, I called my sister who was at Fox. She may deny it, but I remember telling her, there's this trend. You guys really ought to get on it. You ought to jump on it. It's this book that everyone is buying. It's called Twilight. Because I could see it. Another one was that the one about the erotic one. What was it called?
The 50 Shades
of Grey. I remember getting calls from my kids were playing basketball at the time, so the fathers would call me. You got to get this book for my wife. It's called 50 Shades of Grey. You got to get it for her. And at that time, it was
Mitch, who was that who called you?
Was it you? At that point, you couldn't get it. It was self-published. So I remember tracking it down, and I became friendly with the author. But so we're a little, we're like R&D. The books, being a bookseller is a little like R&D for culture in essence.
Does it drive you crazy when you read a book, you go, oh my God, this would be made into a great movie, and someone makes it into a movie and it's a stinker, like 50 Shades of Grey as an example?
Yeah, well, yeah, it does. I mean, what really kills me more is when I think of a book that I love, that I would have been loved to make a movie, and then there are a lot of big money people out there with a lot more experience who get the book. That kills me sometimes when we go after something that we feel like we could really do something special with. But we've been very lucky. I mean, we've been really lucky. We're a young, small company. We made 4 films in basically 3 or 4 years, and we have these TV things going. I mean, it's a kind of a interesting success story.
Well, I think and Josh chime in because we're coming near the end of the program here, but I think that with the success that you've had the last few years and some of the people that you've lined up to work with, I mean, these are acclaimed directors, actors, actresses, writers. I mean, I see nothing but blue skies ahead for Mitchell Kaplan and the production of films and films and shows you're gonna.
I have to give a lot of credit to my partner Paula. This is like I've been a bookseller for 40 years. She's been doing this for that long, and she's also a screenwriter, so she has a really good sense of what all this is about. And for me, it's so terrific because I'm learning a new muscle. And that's what keeps us all young, right? Learning new stuff. Yeah. And we just had, look at you. You're now Larry King.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. Larry King. Loan me $50, right?
Minus the divorces.
And
Andrew, I could talk to you forever, and it's really wonderful having you, around to talk to.
Yeah, I could do this show for Mitchell for hours and hours today. But
before we go, if we want to see the movie, how can we find the movie?
Let him go.
Thank you.
It's on what's called PVOD right now for a short time.
And what is that?
It's Premium Video on Demand.
Okay.
And usually the platforming for that is like you buy it on Apple. If you have DirecTV, sometimes it's available there, on Comcast. But soon it'll be on the streamers, so you'll be able to get it through Netflix or
Prime
or one of those things.
Well, great. I'm looking forward to that.
And it'll be everywhere that way, and they'll start promoting it again that way. But you can watch some of the other ones, like Guernsey is on Netflix. We have another film called All the Bright Places with Elle Fanning on Netflix, and then we have The Man Who Invented Christmas, which is about Charles Dickens and the writing of A Christmas Carol. It's really, really cool. And that you can see on a number of different platforms.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing them all. Nothing better than a local product, a local sort of landmark like Mitchell Kaplan and Books and Books being a part of this sort of wave of creative stuff coming out of South Florida. Really appreciate everything you're doing. And remember one thing, Mitchell, if you need a short, portly, sort of balding, Lebanese looking guy for your next movie, I am available. Okay.
You got it. I mean, we'll figure out a way. Year of Dangerous Days. You were there, right?
I could be like Pee Wee Herman, that just shows up in the movie and says, "What would you like, sir?" One of those deals. But thanks so much for joining us. You're welcome anytime here at Miami Community Newspapers. And hey, listen.
So Andy, you're saying it's time to let Mitch go, right?
It is.
We should say, let's let him go.
Let's let him go, so to say. Exactly, let him go. But hey, there are so many creative people in our community, and people we should support and be a part of what they're doing. And Mitchell Kaplan's just another example of that here in our South Florida community. He is the example.
Well,
thanks,
you guys.
Thanks again, Mitchell, for joining us. And thank you for watching here today at Miami Community Newspapers. We're local, and that's what we talked about today. Again, a local product of our community and Mitchell Kaplan. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow right here at Miami Community News. Have a blessed day.